Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 89, recording on Tuesday, June 10th, the first day of mandatory minicamp. It lasts 3 days. I'll be out at the facility tomorrow, on Wednesday, and on Thursday. What we'll probably do for the podcast here is do kind of a roundup after Thursday, maybe Friday morning or what have you, kind of go through everything we saw today. Specifically, going to bring you a little bit of the sights and sounds from what was a pretty busy day. Obviously, you had Josh Oliver's extension. Christian Darrisaw was back on the field for the first time since tearing his ACL. So a lot going on. Obviously, we'll talk J.J. McCarthy. We'll get into a bunch of, lesser name guys that I kind of stood out to me and just want to get to them throughout the course of this show. As always, the Alec Lewis Show is presented by First Resource Bank. That's a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area. They've got branches all over the place. My favorite one is on Washington, right near that Trader Joe's down there. It's really close by to US Bank Stadium, and you walk in, you got Christy at the front desk. She's phenomenal. If you have questions about how to set up an account, it is about as easy as possible. So please go introduce yourself to Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, Charlie Anderson over at First Resource Bank, and the information on how to sign up for an account and which branches you can hit that are closest to you. That's in the description of this video. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. We're over 3,000 subs now, hoping to keep climbing as we weave our way toward the regular season. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Podbean, wherever you get your podcasts, we're appreciative of it. And you can rate and review and do all that good stuff. The last bit of housekeeping is to, pump over the stories I'm doing over at theathletic.com, where I do my day job and write on pretty much a daily basis about this team with some bigger picture stories dispersed within. I'm going to have something on either Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning on Dallas Turner. Spoke with one of his longtime trainers about kind of what Dallas was like at the beginning of this offseason, the conversations they've had involving a current NFL player who may or may not have a very relevant arc to Dallas's. So please go check that out. It's kind of based around a play that Dallas made today that we're going to get into. Speaking of, let's get right to it. I'll start here. It's first day back at the facility for mandatory minicamp. You know what I had to do on the drive over. You get to Egan. You haven't had lunch. It's about 11 o'clock. Jersey Mike's is just sitting there ready. And though they have not sponsored the podcast yet, and we'll get there at some point, it's the problem. The real question is, can you hit the trifecta of 3 days in a row? If you do that, what does that mean for health? And so that's really where you have to start. It was an exceptional sandwich. They placed the Mike's Way on beautifully. And if you're new to this show, you're probably like, what the hell is going on? But Jersey Mike's is a running staple of fuel for what we do here. And so just have to mention it. J.J. McCarthy is where we'll start. I've said in the past, we're going to do this every time I do kind of an observations, and it'll be throughout training camp of kind of like how J.J. looked today. The J.J. corner is what we'll call it. And I'll just give you the little bit of practice report. I'd say, first of all, if you were to have me benchmark, we've seen him on the field, it seems like twice at this point, in real competitive environments at this point. The first practice I thought was very, very good. The way I described it on here was like if you'd pause time at the end of last year and you press play, I don't know if I could have told you much of a difference from what I saw from what he started to look like late last fall to what he looked like that first practice. And then the second practice probably, it definitely wasn't what the first one was. It also wasn't enough for me to make any big deal about it because I don't think any practice in June is worthy of any big deal. But today probably hovers closer to the first practice, more in the middle of probably those two. Some of the early 7-on-7 periods began with an interception to Byron Murphy, and it was like towards the sideline. It felt like a first read, kind of just let it rip, and the ball gets picked off by Byron Murphy. Now, I don't know if it was like, you got to throw this read. I say this every podcast now, and I think some of the listeners joke with me. It's like, stop rambling about how you're not, but for me, it's worth mentioning every single time that you never know what is being asked of the quarterback on any given snap in some of these practices, and unless you have conversations afterwards that reveal some of the intricacies, and you do at times, it's really hard to nitpick and go crazy. So that's kind of how it started with that interception. You're kind of like, oh boy, here we go. People are going to make a big deal out of this. But I mean, I really, if anything stood out to me about JJ's just how he looked today, it was just probably the arm strength. And I don't mean that from like, the guy can throw 75 yards down the field. It's more just like the ball cuts through the air well on a lot of these over the middle crossing routes, to where I mean, you just don't get the feel that it's not going to have, there's just a clear difference with how he throws the ball over the middle of the field and the zip of those throws compared to the other guys throwing behind him. And it's just how it is. I'm not going to beat around the bush, but there are a couple plays that I wanted to note. There was a seam ball to Josh Oliver, who we will talk about here later in this podcast, where Josh is running from the left side of the line of scrimmage, runs up the seam, a lot of space, but JJ hits him in stride. Kind of looked like Kevin O'Connell was smiling a little bit afterwards, so that was a good one. There was a deep ball that you can find probably on the Vikings social media platforms. I imagine they shared this thing out. Deep ball, right side, over the top of the defense to Jordan Addison. Don't know if that was like a blown coverage from the defense or if like they kind of stopped playing and he just beat him over the top, but it felt pretty legit. So I wanted to mention that. I mean, there were some defensive snaps where, and I don't know if they'll like me saying this or they won't, or I don't really know, but like the Vikings are playing some two-man type defensive coverage, which for the uninitiated is like you got two deep defenders and then you're playing man coverage underneath. They did this more than a couple times last year in London. I remember specifically the game in London against Aaron Rodgers, and I'm not just bringing it up because it's him. I promise. Please don't scream at me. They played the two-man coverage a lot in that game. And it'd be interesting for me to ask, like, whether they tell me or not, like what instances would you really call this coverage in? But for me, it's like when you have a quarterback who's pretty dialed in, who's pretty accurate, and pretty pinpoint, like, you're preventing the deep throws with the two deep defenders, and then you're playing really tight to coverage underneath. Like that's probably where it most fits, but there was a lot of that. So it's just interesting to see like JJ navigate some of those coverages. There were a couple crossing routes to Jalen Naylor, where again, like the zip and the arm strength just kind of shows up. And then there were a lot of, just like underneath checkdowns, backside reads, you get it to the player in the flat. You go 1 to 2 to 3, nobody's open, you get it to the player in the flat. Like there was a lot of that. And this probably is a nice little segue / door to go down. I mean, these, coming up to the field today for mandatory minicamp, having been at OTAs, like you wonder, is it going to be more fast-paced? Is there going to be more 11-11? Is it going to feel more like game speed? Is the pass rush going to be bearing down on them quicker? And the answer, it didn't feel much different at all. And, it's hard for me to recall in my head the speed of OTAs and minicamp in the last couple of years. But it definitely, it's the way I know to describe it is it just seems slower, not like there's not urgency, but just more like they want this to feel more like a walkthrough and less like, like game speed all the time. And folks listening to this might be like, why? Why would they do that? Like, make this feel as real as possible all the time. Well, it's not like it's still the learning and teaching phase. Like, I know, just like you guys, I want to be able to, and probably just like the coaching staff and the other players, like, you're ready to go. You want to see live action. I want to see JJ when the bullets are flying, and Javon Hargrave, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, is flying up the field towards him. Like, not obviously, because I got reader feedback. I'm saying obviously too much. I'm trying to cut it out. And it's like, this is the thing about the Alec Lewis show. We don't cut these parts out. It's just, it's raw. There's no second takes. This is a one-take show, and we're going to see how few times we can say that. And I appreciate the reader feedback because it makes me better. And we'll get back to this. Like, you want to see the full-speed game action type environment, but it's a lot of, it just feels methodical, not like intentional, definitely intentional, but just more methodical. And like, for the YouTube viewers watching this, there are a ton of reps where JJ will get the ball. And then, like, I'm just going to act this out for the YouTube viewers and I'll describe it for the listener, but he'll look to his right, take a beat. Look to the middle, take a beat. Look to the left side of the passing routes coming from the backside and take a beat. And it's very much, it feels like you're going to see coverage. You're going to see what the defense is in. You're going to feel the timing of the routes. You're going to, it's just reps upon reps upon reps and stacking just the visuals of what it's going to feel like. And again, there's no question that when things really get going in training camp and joint practices and the preseason games, the speed ramps up and the game changes. That's why you can never make too much out of these types of things. But it's just worth underscoring the environment that we're seeing kind of on a daily basis. So I'd say with JJ, that was kind of my takeaway today. There was nothing for me that I saw that was like even that interception. The way that I described it to someone recently was, if he's throwing these interceptions now and we're getting those out of the system because he's learning, like when he can throw certain, patterns and when he can't, and this means there's not that interception on Monday night in Chicago against the Bears, like it's phenomenal, work. So that's kind of where we're at with JJ after this first mandatory minicamp day, and we'll keep watching and have further updates. The best play of the day, in my humble opinion, came from a guy that you probably have heard of, and his name is Dallas Turner. Dallas Turner, you can identify Dallas Turner because he wears this green mouth guard, and it flops, and he doesn't wear it. It's attached to his helmet, and it just sways underneath his helmet, back and forth, back and forth. So you can always spot him by just look, like, where is that green mouth guard? Where is it? And the thing about him is, you really you kind of have to look for that green mouth guard because he could be on the line of scrimmage. He could be lined up off the ball. And the best play of the day from him came in a 7-on-7 drill where he's off the ball, and it was some of the backup, it felt, if I'm not mistaken, the quarterback at the time was Sam Howell. Some of the receivers were like some of your second, third string type guys, but Dallas Turner is essentially occupying one of the off-ball linebacker spots with like the second team, and he floats kind of like from the line of, like near the off-ball spot, kind of near the line of scrimmage. He may have, like a receiver might have motioned out to the slot and he followed him over there. And then he floats backwards into like this zone area with eyes on the quarterback, but also with knowledge of the receiver nearby him. And the quarterback, if I'm not mistaken, was Sam Howell, tried to thread it in behind Dallas Turner, who's in coverage. He's an edge rusher, 6'3", 200, close to probably 250 pounds. And here he is in coverage. And most guys, and this is nothing against these guys, but like Patrick Jones and DJ Wanham in the past, those guys were edge rushers, but they really were, defensive ends with some athleticism. There was no way in heck they would look as fluid as Dallas Turner did on this specific play over the middle of the field. And not only does Dallas kind of blanket the receiver, he also intentionally deflects the ball as a PBU, and the other defenders were excited about him, excited about the play. He didn't really make a big deal out of it, but in the moment, it was like, man, that was an impressive play. And it's not because he hasn't shown an ability to play in coverage in the past. You guys can go watch the tape of the Seahawks game last year and the interception that Dallas had in the flat on a backside read from Geno Smith. I haven't forgotten that play. I haven't forgotten that Dallas Turner, with the minimal reps he had, intercepted Geno Smith in the second quarter of a meaningful game down the back half of the season. So it's not like that. It's not like the play blew me away because I haven't seen Dallas Turner, look fluid and comfortable in coverage before. It's more that it was just a heck of a play in one of the few live ball kind of reps that we had. It's funny, after practice, I was asking Jonathan Allen, who went to Alabama, just like Dallas Turner went to Alabama. I was asking Jonathan Allen about what are his early impressions of Dallas Turner, and he made the comment of well, we haven't even put on the pads yet, which was a very, he didn't say it like this, but it was a great reminder of I haven't seen the edge rusher do anything with pads that edge rushers really have to do, which means rush the passer in a full speed instance. But Jonathan Allen essentially was I know where he played. I know the coach he played for. So I think I know everything about the mental makeup and the mindset and everything. But there was no question that the play he made today stood out. Josh Metellus, who was asked about Dallas Turner, he mentioned the play unprompted. So that was a very good sign. Brian Flores talked after practice on Tuesday, and he talked about Dallas Turner. And it was a lot of the same stuff that he's reiterated and said many, many times, that there's never been a worry, that Dallas has always had the level of professionalism, that if he weren't, the reason that he didn't play more than 300 defensive snaps was because he was behind Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel. But Flores did make a point on Tuesday after practice to say essentially, I've always viewed it as three starters. It's just the way the defense was constructed last year made it difficult to have three edge rushers on the field. And so the question for me is, how will they try to navigate wanting to have all three of those guys on the field? Is it Dallas playing off the ball like he was? Is it different sub packages where Dallas is aligned near Andrew Van Ginkel on the edge and in real pass rush instances? Who knows what might happen with injuries that would obviously thrust Dallas into the full-time role, but that remains the biggest question with him, Dallas. It's where is the opportunity going to come from? But the more you watch him, and you guys who are here at training camp, it's one of the things that I would ask you to do if you show up to training camp, or you're watching the preseason games, or you're here at joint practice or whatever. Watch how comfortable and how confident he looks in coverage, because for guys his size with his pass rushing ability, it is a rarity. And so, like I said, I have a more full story on him that will run Tuesday evening or Wednesday morning in The Athletic, talking to his trainer who worked with him this offseason. So I highly recommend going to check that out. But that was the best play of the day, and it was worth mentioning for me. I touched on these two things before, but the first one, Christian Darrisaw being out there 7.5 months after he tore his ACL in that, it was the last few seconds of the first half of that Rams game in Los Angeles, the Thursday night, and they ran the football. Or maybe they actually, if my memory serves, they threw the football backed up in their own end zone, and Darrisaw got rolled up on, brutal injury. They obviously covered with covered with Cam Robinson and the acquisition. But to see Darrisaw out there, he looked mobile. He moved pretty well. He's wearing a gigantic brace, but as someone said, like, gigantic humans wear gigantic braces, which I thought was an incredibly astute comment. Great to see. I mean, there were reps where you don't see, again, the trenches is probably the one area this time of year where it's just the hardest to really evaluate. If you were to ask me in the comments or for a mailbag or what have you, how does the new interior of the offensive line look? I mean, the first part of answering that question would be to say that we haven't seen Will Fries other than the phenomenal picture that circulated on social media where he was dressed like Tony Soprano smoking a cigar. Exceptional, incredible, absolutely loved it. Got nothing bad about it. That was incredible. And if you missed it, please look that up on social media after this podcast. But not only have we not seen him, but it's just not full speed enough to really get a feel. But in the blocking reps that you see, Christian Darrisaw going against Brian O'Neill, he had the horizontal movement. Was really good to see him out there this early. The other aspect that I wanted to touch on, Josh Oliver's extension that surfaced Tuesday afternoon. It felt like that made sense because he was entering the final year of his contract with void years, but everything that in every way, going back from the beginning, how Wes Phillips talked to, and Wes was the Vikings offensive coordinator, was a longtime tight ends coach, and so the way he talked about Josh at the very beginning of how big of a guy he was, but the pass-catching ability that he possessed, some untapped pass-catching ability, and then just the way they've talked about him over the course of the last couple of years in terms of, filling in for TJ Hawkinson after he tore his ACL, and just occupying a key role in the run-blocking phase where he has the ability, Josh Oliver does, to manhandle and really give these edge rushers problems in the run game. It's a skill set that is difficult to find. It's interesting to me. He played 50%. I got to look this back up. He played 56% of the Vikings offensive snaps in 2024. And obviously the first half of the season was with TJ Hawkinson still recovering from a torn ACL, rehabbing, but heavy amount of snaps. 2023, he played 42% of the snaps, and some of those came after TJ Hawkinson tore his ACL, but he's played a lot. There's probably even more room to increase the 12 personnel usage and kind of, work with TJ Hawkinson as a de facto slot receiver. So it was $11.9 million of new guaranteed money, just not a ton. It might sound like a lot for a run-blocking tight end, but he's huge in what they want to do in the run game, and it hasn't been crazy successful for a host of reasons. I mean, we'll see this year how much of those reasons are the interior of the offensive line, or how much of it has been like a lack of attention paid to the run game by the coaching staff. But Josh Oliver he displaces guys on the edge. I'll never forget one of the best Josh Oliver anecdotes that we have is his introductory press conference in the summer of, that was probably 2023 or spring of 2023. He walks up to the podium in the bowels of the TCO Performance Center, and one media member, who I will leave nameless, asked him a question like, what did you learn from Cam Jordan in New Orleans? And it was assuming that Josh Oliver was Marcus Davenport, who had arrived from New Orleans after being an edge rusher. But the revealing aspect of it was that Josh Oliver looked like an edge rusher, like he legitimately did. And so for the other media member to confuse Josh Oliver with being an edge rusher, not the craziest thing in the world with just his body type. And so Yeah, Josh Oliver, it's never going to be the sexiest. Run blocking as a tight end is never going to be the sexiest spot or position. And Josh Oliver is a very quiet guy who's not really fit for brashness at the podium or what have you. But he's played through a lot of injuries over the last couple of years. Wrist stuff. He's had some arm stuff, and they really respect him internally. So wasn't surprised to see that done. And the next one up probably revolves around Josh Metellus, who a lot of people, you guys, listeners, have asked about. When's that coming? Is that getting close? Josh was asked about the contract on Tuesday, and he said, it's a private matter. I leave that up to Drew, being Drew Rosenhaus, his agent, and the Vikings, front office and stuff upstairs. It hasn't happened to this point. Drew Rosenhaus and the Vikings have an exceptional relationship. A lot of the Vikings clients, specifically defensively, are repped by him. And Drew and Rosenhaus and the Vikings just completed an extension with Andrew Van Ginkel. So there's recent experience. They did one last year with Christian Darrisaw. So there's a lot of experience with it. Josh hasn't probably been participating to the full extent in OTAs and training camp. He was not at one of the earliest practices, but some have called it like a hold in or what have you. I haven't viewed it in that way. If it comes to a point where training camp begins and Josh isn't out on the field, then you start to probably have a conversation. I mean, like, his leverage is right now, a lot of it probably comes from, like, you're already integrating a new safety in Theo Jackson. To not have him in the very short term and be relying on Jay Ward, who has looked good in these practices that we've seen him in a similar type Metellus role. Like, you're relying on a lot. I mean, the other aspect of it is, like, Josh loves being here. He makes that clear every time he talks. He makes that clear by showing up to Timberwolves games as much as he does. And Brian Flores, I mean, last year I did a story on the amount of spots that Josh Metellus plays for Brian Flores defense. And Flores at the time was like, there's very few as valuable pieces to what we do. The difficulty probably in terms of money value and what things look like is, I mean, do you categorize him as a safety? He doesn't really play in the deep half that often. Do you categorize him as an off-ball linebacker? He does that a fair amount, but he also kind of lines up as a slot defender. So do you categorize him as like a cornerback? I mean, usually the comps for extensions are pretty explicit. Like, this guy at a certain age with a certain injury history generates X dollars. With Metellus, the comp is pretty, you're living in the Venn diagram of a lot of different positions. So it's interesting. And again, like, for me, if we get to training camp and Metellus isn't on the field, or he's got an earache or something that seems chronic, then it's worth more discussion. But right now, I'm not going to go crazy about it. And if it were to happen at some point, just wouldn't surprise me. And if it doesn't happen, and if it bleeds into training camp, it's also not going to shock me, and I'm not going to go crazy about it until, I mean, things get really close to that Bears game, and I mean, it hasn't happened. But Josh is a guy who knows this defense as well as anybody. He's incredibly cerebral. He's a focal point to kind of the energy source of that defensive unit, especially without Cam Bynum. So there's just too much reverence for the player and for the team on both sides to think that the chasm would be so great. But we'll see kind of how things go. The rest of my kind of nuggets, if you want to call them that, from Tuesday's mandatory minicamp practice. We'll start with a guy who I've mentioned both here and in writing over at The Athletic, an undrafted player from Utah, a cornerback. His name is Zamiah Vaughn. He's like 6'2". He's not like stocky. He's definitely slighter, probably like 180 pounds soaking wet maybe. But he's been all over the place in these practices. Never with the first team. Like you never see him going up, lining up across from Justin Jefferson or Jordan Addison or even rarely Jalen Naylor. But he's just been around the ball. He's made a couple plays on the ball. He nearly had another interception today in one of the 7-on-7 reps. I heard a lot about him when they initially signed him. He was like a quarterback in Texas, like a no-star recruit. The defensive coordinator at Utah, Morgan Scalley, goes down there to a high school that he's familiar with the coaching staff he knows. He's looking at a receiver, and the high school coach is like, you're looking at the wrong guy. You got to look at my quarterback. And Morgan Scalley, the defensive coordinator at Utah, is like, look at the quarterback I'm a defensive coordinator. And the coach is like, I promise. Like, he could probably do it. You could probably put him at cornerback. Scalley, the defensive coordinator at Utah, ends up taking his word for it. And then he's really only been playing corner for 4 years. But he just stood out to me. And usually it's just like Ivan Pace. It's like Dwight McGlothern last year. Like and for as much as I downplay and think it's worth downplaying the relevance of these practices in June and OTAs and all that, like when a guy continues to surface the way this guy has, it just catches my eye. So I'll continue to be watching him, but he's a very interesting one to me that I wanted to point out for you guys to probably keep your eyes on. Javon Hargrave, this guy is a massive human being. Haven't talked to him yet in person, but like he's got a little wiggle to him, and you can even see it even as they're not going. As it's not like let it rip at the line of scrimmage. Like for as big of a guy as he is, to have the amount of like wiggle that he has, it's just unmistakable. So that's it's definitely caught my eye. One guy we haven't talked a lot about, and there's been no reason to really talk about him, is Jordan Addison. Part of it is there's a guy in front of him named Justin Jefferson who we talk about all the time, understandably. But the other part of it is again, it's good. There hasn't been anything off the field warranting of conversation with him, but this guy is just a baller, man. I mean, there's no drops. He moves so smoothly. It's just every time I'm out here and just kind of taking it all in with the media kind of just like sequestered on a hill and you're just watching, there's just something about that guy in terms of how, and we've seen it on Sundays in games. You guys are like, yeah, Alec, Jordan Addison's a damn good player. Obviously, I know, but he looks in good shape. He's been out here for every rep. He's locked in when he's out here. It's just all been very positive, in my opinion. So wanted to bring him up. Other than that, I think that's probably going to do it for our little rundown here on June 10th. We'll take some questions probably over the course of this week and into next week. Maybe do a mailbag post minicamp next Monday from you guys. But hope some of those nuggets intrigued you. Definitely will be interesting to see how these next 2 days go, if they ramp it up. I mean, there's a lot of like, it's teaching and learning, but there's a lot of like, you can even see they're working on like cadence at the snap, with pass protection, with, slides of the offensive line. It's a lot of like the nitty gritty stuff that teams who don't have pre-snap penalties, teams who aren't allowing unblocked pressure to fly through the line of scrimmage. Like they just are on their P's and Q's because they've repped at this time of year the stuff that you kind of have to. So that's what a lot of this has been so far. It's what a lot of it was Tuesday. Looking forward to seeing Wednesday and Thursday how things progress, and hopefully we'll have a guest later this week to dive into it. Everything we saw, but it'll be fun to be out here. Can't wait to continue the coverage. You'll find that at The Athletic, where I do my day job covering this team. The story for Dallas Turner will probably be live by the time you're listening to this, so find that over at the website with some thoughts from his trainer. Other than that, please support First Resource Bank. They love this community. They love this team. You kind of want a banker that you can trust, obviously, first of all, but also that, you can have a conversation with. Tim Siegley, Charlie Anderson, Aaron Siegley, they want to talk Vikings. They're willing to dive into the most minutia of this team, so please go check them out. And then if you made it all the way here on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, you can hit the like and do all that good stuff. We'll be on KFAN Wednesday morning, so you can look and listen for that. With that, we will say goodbye. That'll do it for episode 89 of the Alec Lewis Show. Talk to you guys very soon.